Okay, it looks like we got a lot of people. Okay, so hi everyone. Thanks for joining the Ask the Recruiter event. My name is Max Green. I'll be your moderator for the event. And we're very lucky to have 4 UO alumni that work in recruiting with us today. We're going to talk about questions to help job seekers and also exploring recruiting in a career. Also at the end, we'll have about 10 minutes for the audience to ask questions. So I know we have a jam-packed thing, so let's dive in. So the first thing we'll do is, let's go around the panel. Please introduce yourself and share your favorite thing about being a recruiter. And Kelly, do you mind if you start us off?
Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you for having me. My name's Kelly Weiss. I graduated from University of Oregon, the College of Business in 2015. I can't believe it's already been that long. And I would say my favorite thing about being a recruiter is just the opportunity to connect with people on, a really personal level. Um, I see that the job search obviously can bring forth a lot of emotions, imposter syndrome, and it really, you have to be vulnerable in a lot of situations throughout the job process. So I feel like it just allows me to be a coach and a therapist and a friend. And I really do feel like it's a privilege to be in the role.
And Ken, do you want to dive in next?
Absolutely. My name is Ken Dash. I'm the recruiting manager for Pacific Source, which is a local not-for-profit health plan. I graduated from the U of O in 2016. My favorite thing about recruiting is kind of meaningful conversations with candidates and really kind of getting to know them and know what makes them tick, because I think that really helps in the recruiting process. I know that in some areas it's more than others, but at my company, there's a lot of partnership, and so I can get a lot of information that's really useful for the hiring managers and the screening conversations I have. So I think that would be my favorite part, talking to folks.
And yeah, you want to go next?
I do. Hello, everyone. My name is Mia Santitham. I am a corporate recruiter here at Beacon Hill Staffing Group, and I'm also a 2019 U of O grad. My favorite thing about being a recruiter is similar to Ken and Kelly's. It is that genuine relationship building aspect of it, being able to be a part in someone's pivotal life changes and hopefully change their life for the better, hopefully change their family trajectory, be able to come through for a hiring manager as well, is so special to me. So that is probably my most favorite thing.
Awesome. And last but not least, Seneca.
Hi, everybody. My name is Seneca Clemens. I graduated from the University of Oregon this past June in 2022. I work at a local nonprofit here in Eugene, Pearl Buck Center. I do job development as well as working on the outreach team. And I think my favorite part of doing recruitment, not to parrot my panel mates here, but just getting to connect people who really care about our mission with a company and a mission that I really care about. It's a very special opportunity to get to know people and support a mission I really care about. So, yeah.
That's awesome. So as you can see, we have like a wide range of experiences from different industries. So they're going to bring a lot of perspective to this conversation. So, jumping right in, questions for job seekers. What do you wish job seekers knew more about the job search process? And, Kelly, do you mind if you can lead with this one?
Yeah, of course. So I think the biggest thing is you don't have to have everything figured out. And I wish that someone had told me that when I was in school. It takes time. It can be a really discouraging process to find a job, and know that in a lot of cases you may fail or you may take the wrong path before finding your dream job. And sometimes I think the biggest thing too is you have to take a job that might not be exactly what you want in order to land in the place that you were really always meant to be. I started out of college at Frito-Lay, and I was actually driving the 30-foot truck backing into the loading docks at 2 in the morning, stocking the chip aisle. And here I am today. I've been at Google for about 7 years now in recruiting, and it's changed my life. And I would not be where I am today without that experience. It was so humbling. It gave me so many skills, life lessons, and whatnot that led me to where I am today. So I think don't be afraid to take a chance on something that may not have been like your original dream role.
Yeah, that's great advice. It's never a straight path for sure. I don't know if anyone else from the panel wants to jump in as well for their own experiences. If not, got definitely more questions. And so, the next one, I think, for Ken, I would love you to lead this one.
I believe we lost your volume, Matt.
Oh, I was on mute. Oh, that's my
Yeah,
first.
I lip read though. You're asking me to tell the difference between a resume and an application, right?
Yes, correct. Love to
My
know
lip
that.
reading skills are really good. Good. Okay, I also am reading it from the paper in front of me. Anyway, I like to take this question mainly because on LinkedIn and other social media sites, there's a lot of people who kind of make an income from coaching people, career coaches, things like that. And they often will, talk about, why can't you just take my resume from the ATS system and things like that. And so I like to, when I'm career coaching people, that's like where I start, like what the difference between a resume and an application is. So just jumping in, a resume is really a sales tool. Like it's going to get you an interview. It's going to highlight the areas that relate to the job that you're applying to, and it's going to celebrate your successes, right? So it's really intent is to get a recruiter or a hiring manager interested in having a conversation with you. Whereas an application is like a historical document, really. It's like a list of the things that you did at your job, your previous jobs. And so it's going to be a more exhaustive list. It's not going to be 1 or 2 bullet points, right? And so when you're looking at that, it's what gets you paid. At the end of the day, when somebody's doing a wage analysis, especially in the states that have like equal pay laws, like those duties that you were doing are going to add money to your pocket. So if something says you need 5 years of experience doing X, and you've done that task in all 10 years of your experience, you want to make sure that's included on your application. So when people just upload their resume and use that as an application, A, it doesn't capture everything. And B, like they're just different tools. It's not going, like you're not going to be able to do the same thing, and you're not going to use them to their maximum potential by using one for both. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great feedback. I mean, that's something, especially when I came into the job search, I was just applying, just using my resume as the same template every single time. And, that nuance is very important for sure. Kind of continuing that conversation, this is something I always had a question about that I don't know if it's really taught in schools. Like, what is the best way to reach out and develop relationships with recruiters on LinkedIn? And also like develop a longer term relationship and the type of questions you should ask to develop that relationship. I don't know if Kelly, you want to talk about that a little more.
Yeah, definitely. I think, one of the most important things is finding common ground. And so obviously the beauty of all of us being together today is we share that common ground of, University of Oregon. One thing that I think is really, really important though to note is, for example, at Google, in recruiting, we're segmented by role profile. So what I mean by that is I recruit for technical roles, software engineers, technical program managers, product managers. So that kind of means I don't really have a lot of insight into roles outside of those areas. And so when reaching out to recruiters, it's really, really beneficial to share, what role you saw online that is open and that you're interested in applying for. And that can really kind of help a recruiter understand how they can help you in a sense. And so if anyone here were to reach out and say, hey, I saw this role at Google and maybe I don't recruit for that specifically, it's much easier for me then to say, okay, great, I'll find exactly who the recruiter is that supports that. But I think the biggest thing, when people reach out to me, I love seeing those that take initiative. So maybe phrase it, hey, I've been preparing for my interviews in XYZ way. Is this the correct way? Or do you have any other recommendations? Really asking questions, showing initiative. Those are really wonderful places to start. And then questions to ask to recruiters. I would always ask, how can I prepare now in order to be successful when I onboard? Or I think a big thing is, what is the culture like in the organization? I think we all deserve to be at a place where we feel a sense of belonging. And so understanding the culture is pivotal too. And then the last thing I always just recommend is ask for feedback. That is how we learn, that is how we grow, that is how we become better. So don't be afraid to ask for feedback. I know sometimes you might hear things that worry you, but it's all going to help you in the long run.
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, it's a full picture. And I know, for the next topic, I asked a lot of feedback on my resume throughout my whole process in college. So I'd love to know, from Mia, what are the biggest, red flags that candidates should try to avoid with their resume?
Yes, great question. I was thinking about this, and I would say a resume along with a cover letter or follow-up email application, this can all fall within the same red flag areas that you would want to avoid. Of course, the obvious is spelling and grammar. Be very diligent about spelling, and I unfortunately even had a situation today with follow-up emails with misspelling did raise some concerns with some hiring managers. So being diligent, maybe sending it to a colleague or bringing it to the career center to have someone proofread it and make sure it's all good to go. So that is probably the biggest thing. Other than that, I would say that you have your correct contact info on there. Other things that I have ran into by being a recruiter is by communicating with someone on one email address and them having maybe their school email address listed on their resume, or maybe a home number on the phone, a cell phone number that they mainly use. So making sure whatever main email you use is also listed on your resume, and whatever main phone you use is listed on your resume so you don't miss any calls or emails. Then similarly to the contact info, very important to have a professional email address. I know a lot of us, me included, had maybe funny email addresses made up in whatever stage of life you made your email up as, and just keeping it clean, professional, doesn't have to follow any certain first name, last initial, or last initial, first name type format, but making sure there's no unprofessional things within your contact info is super important. And then be sure to include dates on any of your work experience and from what date to what date. You don't have to get as specific as the day you started and the day you left, but months is a good rule of thumb for us here when we source at Beacon Hill. Seeing someone has been there from May 2020 to June 2023 is a bigger difference for us than January 2023, more at the beginning of the year. So having a month in there is very important. And then other than that, and again, some jobs may be a little bit different, but we definitely like to see your most recent experience listed at the top of your resume, going down, because that is the first thing your hiring manager or recruiter will see. And if they see your very first job out of school, it may not be as relevant to where you are trying to target as a software developer or HR recruiter, whatever the situation may be. So making sure your most recent position is listed at the top is super important. And then other than that, making sure those red flags don't trickle into cover letters, of course, and you can explain any employment gaps, anything that you may feel your resume is weaker on. That can be explained in a follow-up email, or if you don't feel that an interview went as well as you thought, or maybe you didn't answer a question as specifically as you wanted to, follow-up email, of course, comes after the interview. Cover letter can address any concerns or hesitations before, and then with those, date, correct contact info, grammar, spelling, all those things to avoid that can be red flags can be trickled down to those things as well. So that is my overview.
That's excellent advice. And that's like almost like a full checklist that, a candidate should go through and make sure they knock out every single one, because it's really competitive. And little small mistakes here and there is a big separating factor. This is one of the things kind of transition. The next question is, what sets a candidate apart? I always have that question. I was like, how did that person get the job? How did that person get a job? And maybe Ken, you can talk about a little bit more about what sets a candidate apart. And then there's also a follow-up with that.
Yeah, kind of bridging the two, I would say, like, not having a one size fits all resume. Like, resume should be tailored to the job. So I'll use that to kind of transition. Like, being prepared starts when you're putting in your resume and your application. So there's the administrative side of being prepared, which is like, make sure your resume is updated to match the job. Make sure that you're physically ready for the interview, like whatever that means, however you come to peace, whether it's like meditation or what have you. The majority of the mistakes that are made in interviews are just physiological responses to stress. Like, you talk in circles, or you get distracted, or you kind of block up. All of that stuff can be avoided by preparing and being ultra prepared. And so I would say that sets people apart. Make sure that before you do the interview, that you're preparing for two different styles of questions, because a lot of companies do behavioral style interviewing, which will say, like, tell me about a situation when X happened, or they might do like resume type questions. Like, can you tell me about why you have a gap here, or why you transitioned from this or that? So like, being prepared for a diverse set of questions is really important, because unless you talk to a recruiter like me, who's really transparent, you don't know what style of questions they're going to ask. And so just being prepared for more traditional questions, and then more situational questions. And then I would say, like, the biggest thing for transitioning is like knowing, like, make the connection between what you did, before and now. And so I recently, by recently, I mean 4 years ago, transitioned from sales and service management, different levels of a couple organizations, into HR. And so, like, knowing what the transferable skills are, and then being able to communicate those. And then the last thing I'll say is just like, making sure that your red flags. Like, if you had 2 jobs out of college that were 6 months each, that's going to be something they may ask you about, right? So like, you need to know your why, as far as those red flags that you might have on your resume. And so I think that that's kind of like, people who are really prepared, who are, conscious of what they're missing, or what they need to communicate as far as like transferable skills, are the people who typically stand out in interviews.
Yeah, that's all really great advice. Yeah, thank you, Ken. And then, another one I think this kind of transitions to it is, what are mistakes, so you build up that foundation, you have your resume in place, you have your cover letter, you get the interview, and you're like, okay, how do I not screw up the interview? So what are the common mistakes that you see job seekers making in the interviewing process? Seneca, do you mind if you can go into that one?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. So I think kind of the overarching theme of this answer is just kind of research and preparation. I think I can tell, when we have a candidate stepping into an interview, if they're a little confused about, us, what we do, the role that they're applying for. And I think that shows in the quality of their answers. And, we want to feel like the candidates applying to work with our agency are interested in us and what we do, and have come to us kind of prepared to talk about the position and the work we do. So yeah, I think that it's really important to research the agency that you're applying to research kind of what they do, their scope, their size, those sort of things, so that you have a clear picture of kind of who's going to be on the other side of that table when you step into an interview. I think also it's important to prepare some questions to ask your interviewers coming into an interview. If you're somebody who maybe gets a little nervous and isn't great thinking on the spot, I can't recommend enough just jotting a couple things down, as you're doing that research, a couple things that you're curious about, so that you have something to refer back to when you're in that setting and the nerves are kind of kicking in. I think that really shows interest and dedication to the specific position. And then finally, I just wanted to touch on to kind of bringing confidence into the interview. And I think it's important to note too that you can be confident and nervous at the same time. I know that I still get nervous when I'm kind of interviewing people, no matter what. That stuff just makes me nervous. But stepping into these spaces, knowing that you are a viable candidate, that the work you have done is worth being taken seriously and spoken of in high regard. I think that, you know, we encourage people to really come into these interviews knowing that they have what it takes, and we can tell when you're sitting across from us, just kind of that you have that kind of outlook and confidence. That really makes a big difference for sure.
No,
I
that's
just
a really
wanted to
great
add.
point. Oh yeah,
Oops,
go for
sorry.
it. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that was beautiful. I wanted to add, just because I think it's important to acknowledge in this room, like everyone has different learning styles, everyone has different levels of anxiety. I struggle like tremendously with anxiety. So I do want to note that it's okay when they ask you questions, you do not need to respond right away. I remember that was like a failure that I had learned from of myself, is when recruiters, or when I was interviewing and I got asked a question, I felt like I needed to immediately respond. And it's okay to take some time. I love when candidates say, "Hey, you know what? Can I repeat that question back to you? I really want to make sure I understand." Or, "Hey, do you mind if I jot this question down so I can visualize it, because that's the way that I think." Like those, we should celebrate everyone's differences and how they learn. And so I think, you know, that's one thing too. Don't beat yourself up if you need some time.
Absolutely. And Seneca,
Absolutely.
dive in.
Oh, pardon me, Max. Yeah, no, I think that self-knowledge piece is really important. You know, I really relate to that, Kelly. I get pretty anxious too. And I can get that kind of deer in headlights response sometimes. And knowing about yourself ahead of time and saying, "Oh, that's a great question. Give me a second to think about it." Or like, "Hey, you know, sometimes I get a little overwhelmed. If I can ask you to repeat the question ahead of time." I think that, you know, candidates who have that self-knowledge and that drive to advocate for themselves in these spaces, like that can't hurt you. It only helps you. I think it's only an admirable trait that you know yourself and know how to advocate for yourself and your needs in an interview setting.
You know, all really great advice. Yeah, I think it's everyone probably in the call has been in an interview, and it's very nerve-wracking, and having different strategies is what I'm hearing to calm that down. Is just super important. It can help you stand out, of course. So, you know, another thing, the transition is, okay, so we're now in the interview process. You know, what are some of the reasons how candidates move on to the final round versus others? I think we're kind of speaking on it, but, you know, Ken, can we talk about, you know, how do candidates separate themselves past the final round if you're able to get
Yeah,
that?
I think it's all about engagement, and here's where it's really important to know your why. Like when you're going into a final interview, you're typically interviewing with leadership people, you know, mid to senior level leadership people. And what they care about is like, do your values align with their mission? So knowing your why is almost as critical as showing in your resume that you can do the job. Because if you can do the job, but you don't fit the culture, you're not the best candidate. And so I would say like, know your why. And like, I always prepare questions. Like I know what makes me stand out from other people. I can both talk to people and have meaningful conversations, and I can go do analytics. Like I can take all the data from our hires from last year, I can code it, and I can do data analytics. So I know that I can make business decisions based on data, right? So I'm going to make sure that my values and my strengths are talked about in the final interview. Like if they don't ask me, I'll ask them. I'll say, "Hey, what brings you here and what keeps you here?" Because then I get to talk about my values and how they relate to the company. Or I might like, "Hey, can you tell me about how you use data to make business decisions on a day-to-day basis?" Because I know that I can go and tell them, "Hey, yeah, give me whatever, what do you use? Do you use SAS? Do you use Stata? Do you use SQL? What do you use for your data?" I can go and I can pull the data and I can tell you why we made this business decision, and I can use the data kind of to help drive the decisions, right? Which is huge, and especially in HR in this day and age, because there's a lot of transition to there. So those are the things, like be engaged, ask the questions, make sure you're getting what brings you to the dance, essentially, in that final round of interviews.
No, that's really good advice. I don't know if anyone from the panel also has, different perspective too with their different organizations, or pretty much all agree with Ken.
I agree with Ken that that was some great advice. I would say also for my company, we typically do multiple round interviews versus one and then a final. So having a candidate share what they've learned so far in the interview process and not starting from ground one again from each individual interviewing them. So an example of this is maybe you'll meet with a recruiter first, interview with them, and then you'll meet with the specific manager of that team. And then next round interview may be more leadership and they're the manager's manager. So being able to articulate or even grasp what you learned on your interview with the recruiter, then what you learned with your interview or on your interview with the manager, and what your takeaways were from that, and how you can be the best fit for that role because of what you learned from the day in the life from the specific manager versus the overall arching company values from the recruiter, say. So taking your previous conversations and letting that next interviewer know all that you've learned is so important, because of course, just as nerve-wracking it is for the interviewers also can feel like, is my time being well spent? Am I being heard? Am I answering correctly? Am I giving them all the resources that they need to make the best decision for their career choice long-term? So being able to gather all that information and exhibit it to the next interviewer is a big thing for us.
Yeah, really good feedback. I don't know, Kelly, Seneca, if you have anything else to add on that one, or feeling pretty good?
I was just going to add a little. One way I got one of my first jobs was by writing thank you notes. And I know, a lot of people like send emails now to say thank you. And whenever I receive those, I think it's just incredible because obviously you took the time to do so. But I do think a handwritten thank you note goes a really long way these days. So even, little things like that to consider when you're interviewing, I think is a really, something to keep top of mind.
Yeah, really good advice. Really, really good advice. I think definitely could do that. And then kind of just taking a broader perspective, how do like Ken, Seneca, how do you see the recruiting space changing in the next 5 years? And how should job searchers prepare for these type of changes? I don't know if we can lead with Seneca. You want to go first?
Sure. I'd be happy to. I think, the perspective that I can bring into this, kind of being a pandemic college grad and then kind of being popped out of the other side of my educational experience into this really this dynamic and quickly changed I should say job market, right? Is just kind of being adaptable and really understanding that, I guess, every task you've ever performed, every school project that you've ever done, that has these transferable skills. You can break down that task analysis and kind of cream off those skills that you've gained from those kind of things, because I think that the pandemic really showed us that work can change fast, and that in order to kind of be retainable, be a enticing candidate, I think understanding your own ability to adapt and understanding the way that your specific skills beyond, the job description that you perform now or the degree that you have now, what did you learn by getting that degree? If you were writing essays, now you know how to digest and analyze information, right? Those are those kind of skills that you can glean out of these tasks that you have, and creating that kind of adaptability for yourself. If you're going remote, if you're doing a hybrid job, if you're doing something like that, know that that's where you're marketable. It isn't necessarily that, you know, you've checked every single box and you're on paper perfect for this role. That isn't necessarily what makes the best candidate. And I think that kind of as recruiters came through this transition, like what we're realizing, right, is that that having like adaptable, skill-oriented employees is really an asset that pays dividends like forever down the road. So that's definitely the perspective I can add to that question.
I think what I would add is like the labor market is really at a unique place. The pandemic, I think, taught people that there's more to life than earning money. And so we've seen a shift in both the average age of market entry, meaning people are not starting as early in the labor market, and then they're leaving earlier. And so the pool of candidates out there is shrinking due to that, right? And so the key thing is whenever you have a market dynamic like that, AI and automation and things like that really are pushed like pretty hard by senior leadership, so that they can make up the gap, right? So what I would say is like, as far as adjusting to that is like, be something a computer can't be, right? The one thing we have unique to the human experience is that we can combine IQ and EQ. Like a computer, we're probably never going to beat them in IQ, right? Like you can, maybe a chess master might, but probably not most people. However, we do balance the emotional intelligence with like textbook and situational intelligence. And so really harnessing that and like, and you know, paying attention to like understanding data, understanding where data sources come from, being able to use technology really well in combination with, you know, our decision making and how we interact with people and stuff like that. It was going to be, that's what's going to probably separate candidates and in the future.
Yeah, very good advice, because it's really hard to see in the future of like, how do I prepare myself? I totally agree with that. So now
Don't be replaceable.
Yeah, exactly. It's a little bit harder said than done, but the other thing too, you know, we want to transition, you know, just talk about recruiting also as just a career as a whole. You know, I think there's a lot of people in the call and then also, you know, in school that say like, I actually want to become a recruiter. That's what I want to do. And so we want to dive into that a little bit more. So Seneca, can you talk about, you know, some of the skills that you need in order to be an effective corporate recruiter?
Absolutely. I think that, you know, you can really compare recruitment and sales in a lot of kind of what you end up doing on the job, because essentially you are selling your agency, your company to prospective job seekers. So really having that kind of a personality to be able to grab somebody's attention and make a connection with them off the bat. And I want to preface that with saying too, you don't need to be an extrovert to be good at this job. You don't need to be seeking out people all the time, 24/7, even in your personal life, to be effective at this job. But just knowing how to kind of turn those skills on when you need it, being outgoing and positive, and really, I think, at least from the perspective that I can offer, knowing your why for why you are part of the company, because I think it's easy to tell when someone is just going through the motions and not necessarily selling, I should say, recruiting from a genuine place. So if you know you're interested in getting into recruiting, no matter what kind of industry, what size of agency, know why you want to be bringing people to where you work. Why did you want to work there? What drew you to it? And because I think that understanding that kind of that why, people can see that and people really gravitate towards that genuine energy. And then I think too, just being able to articulate and negotiate thoughts and those sort of things eloquently, be it written communication, verbal communication, just really making sure that you can communicate ideas efficiently and effectively, because depending on the kind of interaction that you're having with somebody, you may only have a couple minutes or like a quick email to really leave an impression. Yeah, so that's the advice I would give.
Yeah, really good advice. I don't know if anyone from the panel has anything else to chime in to. I know we're all good with that. Awesome. Okay, so then we have another question, which is a little more niche. Is what advice would you give into breaking into recruiting internally versus externally? So Mia, if you want to tackle that one.
Great question, Max. And I loved what Seneca said, and I would love to echo that. A lot of my colleagues, or myself included, before breaking into this industry, I didn't realize how many intersections there were with that whole sales environment. But I'll back up. Within recruiting, there's many different avenues you can take, but I would say the main two would be internally, which can be internal for a company. You're most likely on your HR team or talent acquisition team. You are helping staff and recruit members for the company you work within. And then the other avenue will be external. And that is like the company I work for, which my job's a little bit special because I'm an internal recruiter for an external recruiting company. But as far as like a staffing firm goes, they will have external clients and external hiring managers that they team up with and help matchmake from there and perform any recruiting or talent acquisition services for outside companies. So you are both being that relationship manager to clients and candidates. So internally, I would say some things you can do to break into the career would be joining the SHRM Club, anything that has to do with HR, being an HR assistant for any company, or finding ways to involve yourself in the hiring process or HR process in your current role, whether that be helping screen resumes, helping the interview process, and also learning all about policies, procedures. There's a lot of laws that go into talent acquisition and HR as a whole. So starting to familiarize yourself with those different family labor laws and what is happening in current events within your select industry that you're interested in. And then on the flip side of that, we have external recruiting that I feel like a broad overview, it can be more seen as sales, where a lot of external or staffing firms do a base salary plus uncapped commission. So it is that sales environment where you are getting commission per individual you are getting a job. But I loved what Seneca said. Recruiting as a whole is very similar to that sales environment. You are dealing with a high volume of candidates. And I think that's something I didn't really realize before breaking into this career. It will be lots of calls, lots of follow-up, lots of feedback, being that liaison middle piece between hiring managers, the candidate themselves, making sure both parties are having good experiences, making sure you are selling your company in a sense, as well as being as transparent as possible, hopefully sharing any negatives or downfalls that may come with the role, because very similar to my panel members, we are all about longevity and long-term relationships. So getting someone a job just for a couple minutes, a couple months, is not as satisfying or not what we're targeting, rather than getting someone a job long-term, changing their lives. So I would say any sales club experience, sales experience in general, HR experience, and even being able to relate your even service industry experience or hospitality experience to recruiting by being involved in the process or showing that you love working for tips, working for metrics. I would say that is my biggest tips to breaking into recruiting in general.
Really good advice. I really appreciate the in-depthness of everything. And then the last question we have, or second to last question we have, is, what's the most unexpected lesson you learned from entering and recruiting that you didn't know before? And Kelly, you mind if you dive into this one?
Yeah, definitely. So for everyone in the room, it's not like I woke up one day and I was said, today is the day I really have decided I want to be a recruiter. I think what I've learned is that it's given me the opportunity to genuinely change people's lives. And in my time at Google, I've hired someone who had, fallen on some tough times, who was just extraordinarily, incredibly intelligent and inspiring. And he was sleeping on a park bench homeless when I had first contacted him. He was riding the bus to stay warm, in the winter, and he ended up getting hired as a software engineer at Google. I also had a candidate who said because Google believed in him, it allowed his mom, to believe in herself and to go back to college and finish her college degree. So I think in recruiting, it's much more than helping people find roles that are fulfilling. It's about really transforming communities and generations to come. And I think it's like a privilege to be in this role. And I think if you're the type of person that wants to give back in some way, recruiting allows you to do that on a day-to-day basis.
It's really incredible stories. Thank you, Kelly. And then, the last question we have for everyone from the panel is, why is it important to create a representative pipeline of candidates and create an inclusive, equitable workplace for your agency's perspective? So we can go, one by one. If Sinica, you want to lead off, and then
I'd be happy to. So from the perspective of where I work, we're a local nonprofit here in Eugene. We serve specifically adults with intellectual and developmental disabilities through, multiple aspects of their lives and navigating kind of the systems that be and that sort of thing. And I think that it's really important for the clientele that we serve to have a diverse body of people serving them. I think that historically, the knowledge that lived experience provides has really been downplayed as illegitimate, or perhaps just not as important as, certificates or work experience or that sort of thing. But nothing can substitute for the knowledge of that you have of the life that you've lived, and having, I think, a diverse body of employees who bring a lot of different experience and knowledge and understandings of not just the system, but the system from perspectives that, people like me, other people may not have. And so I think that the more kind of perspective that we can bring into the services that we provide, we're able to provide higher quality services because of it.
I can go next. So, short of it being the right thing to do, I would add, I think, skills and abilities and talents and things like that are equally distributed regardless of gender, nationality, race, religion, or what have you, but opportunities have not necessarily been distributed equally. And we have a lot of systems that are changing, of course, but have kind of led to that. And so I think that from our perspective, DEI has been in the news a lot lately, but we've been working on it for the entire 90 years that we've been here. We do a lot of things to reach out to community and to engage different underrepresented groups of folks to just basically make sure that they know of the jobs and the opportunities. And the reason is simply because they deserve that. Like, that's the right thing to do, to give everybody the same opportunities and to provide, the information to, I guess, multicultural groups and the LGBTQ plus groups. And so I think that the reason that we think it's important is A, it's the right thing to do, and B, like, we want to make sure that we're giving everybody the opportunity, and the way you do that is by making sure your organization is reflective of the both the demographic population of the areas that you live and the people you serve.
And Mia, do you want to go next?
I would love to. I agree with my panel members as well, with it being the right thing to do. But as far as my specific company goes, we definitely put an emphasis on it as well. And our CEO was actually ranked best CEO in our staffing recruiting firm industry for diversity. And reason being is that we find so much value in the outlook and perspective of individuals from every different cultural background, national background. lifestyle background even, and making sure that all the clients we serve and all the candidates we serve can also be represented by people that they feel they can relate to, and have hopefully a commonality with them as well. And so that is why it's so important to us. And like my panel members as well, we're striving to be better at it every day and definitely make sure that underrepresented groups are being represented.
I can just add one last thing. I love what everyone said, and I think this is, one of my favorite questions. At Google, we always talk about we build products that are used by hopefully everyone around the world. And so in order to do that, we obviously need people that are representative of our user base in order to make sure that we build the best products that reflect everyone that utilizes them. So that's one piece on the business side. But I think the most important note is, we oftentimes talk about being able to bring your best self to work. And in order to do so, you have to have psychological safety. You have to have community. You have to have a place that celebrates everyone. And that's obviously too how you retain and how you gain amazing talent. So it's so, so important. And I think we should celebrate it at every level of business.
Completely agree with that, and really love the advice and feedback from the panel. So we went through all of our questions. Now we want to transition over to the questions from the audience right now. So if you have any questions, put it in the Q&A box. We have a lot, so I'll just dive in, because I know we only got about 10 more minutes to go through. This was one of the first questions asked, and I thought it was an interesting one. Is how do I avoid scams when searching for jobs online? How do I know it's really the company I'm talking to and I'm reaching out to, or it's something else? Is there any advice the panel has for that?
If it's too good to be true, then it probably is.
That's good. I love that. And I can also take another stab. I would say if anyone or recruiter is requesting information that is like, of course, social security or driver's license, anything that, speaking from my own experience, we don't need any of that information until you have a job offer and you've met hopefully people that you can FaceTime with or see in person. So if anyone requests any information, I would say do not move forward with them. Also, email addresses. So most scammers will do something very close to the email address that the actual employers will have. So I would just go to that company's website, double check. Maybe they'll have like a couple of the leaders' emails on there in the contact section. Double check that last @ section, and you should be good to go if they have the correct email.
Really good advice. Yeah, definitely do not want to get scammed on that, for sure. Another, this is an interesting question too, is there advice for people, candidates that have criminal records, also when applying to jobs? And is it worth telling recruiters up front, or wait during the interviewing process for that?
I can answer that one, because I've actually had candidates that have had criminal backgrounds, and what I always preface is we all make mistakes. That's life, and it shouldn't be what determines your future. So I highly recommend being upfront about it at first. The only reason being is because once we do extend offers, then you have to complete a background check. So it's better to just be upfront about it in the beginning. And a lot of times, you can have a really honest conversation that will make sure that you're set up for success throughout the process. But that's a wonderful question. And I do think that it's something that does not define a candidate.
So in some states like Oregon and Washington, you can't even ask that on an application anymore. I actually have a different point of view, not saying that I'm right or wrong, but I would say leave it to the background check, because oftentimes, like, you might have, if you have something from 10 years ago and somebody does a 5 or 7 year background check, it's not even going to show up. Like, it's really, I don't think it's an employer's business unless they're going to make you an offer. Like, like just like salary, I wouldn't tell an employer what I was making either. There's some things that, like, that they don't necessarily need to know unless you're in the offer process, and just from my perspective.
Oh, really good advice. We have a bunch more questions, so I'm going to dive into a couple more. I thought this was another interesting one is, so how do you explain maybe like a demotion in your career trajectory? So you had a job and you're getting, increasing titles, and then maybe you took a job that was a demotion and you're moving on to the next, job, and you're trying to explain that to a recruiter. Is there a way to sell that, or, talk about that type of scenario?
I'd be happy to offer my advice for this question. I think that kind of the best way you're going to sell that is the truth. I think it's understandable. I remember reading a little bit more of this question before you asked it, Max, mentioning going back for an MBA and therefore kind of downsizing your role at work. I think that makes a lot of sense. And from a recruitment standpoint, like, of course, you would want to downsize your role at work a little bit so that you can gain that knowledge and really highlight your why. I think that going back to school is great, and that it's not a hindrance to you as a candidate. I think it's a selling point, and it comes back to kind of that self-knowledge and like believing that you're a good candidate for that role. I think recruiters can see that, and so it's all part of the story, right? For why you're here sitting across the table from us now. And as someone who's interviewing you, I want to understand your story the best that I can. I don't think it's about necessarily always achieving the highest rank that you possibly can and having the shiniest, glowiest resume. I want to get to know you as a person, and will you perform well at our agency and in the role that you applied for.
I love that. And if I could just add one thing, I had spoken to a candidate that went from sales manager back down to sales representative. And when I asked about this demotion, because they went from sales rep to sales manager back to sales rep, they clearly explained to me that they love being in the client-facing business, and being the sales manager, they were just internal and speaking to and going over metrics with their internal employees versus being that salesy individual and going out to the client spaces and being able to make more commission in that sales representative role versus the sales manager. So of course, this will be different for every situation, but very similar to what Seneca was saying. Why did that demotion happen, or why did you choose this role? And highlight, maybe it's the job responsibilities or money commission ability, the sales part of it, and being able to highlight that and relate it to the role you're going for. I think that looks great.
Really good advice. Another question that we had is, I know there's like this common advice that I had is like, you want to get a referral for a job. I think it kind of gives you a leg up. So can we talk about how important referrals are for a job? And then how do you use referrals in the job interview process once you have it? Don't know if anyone has a strong opinion on that. Want to dive in?
I can dive in if we, referrals are great. However, don't let it stress you out if you do not have one. I think I was petrified of that when I started job searching, that I was going to be put at the bottom of the list if there were others that had referrals. That's just one small data point. So I think I want to preface with that. But referrals, if you do know someone at a company that's willing to submit a referral, what I think is the number one thing to really share with them is like XYZ skills as to why you'd be a great fit for a certain job. At Google, we see so many referrals come in that say, I think they'd be a great addition to Google. And it's pretty much, that's all it says. So taking kind of responsibility yourself and share with that individual that is going to refer you, if you do have the opportunity to get a referral, really clearly articulate what they should be writing when they submit that, because that will go leaps and bounds further than just a generalized statement.
And I would say, like, make sure you know who's referring you. Like, if you know somebody that works at a company and they're talking about skipping work or hating their company or hating their boss, like, if I get a referral from I mean, I've literally had hiring managers say, I wouldn't hire anybody that person referred. Because if they have a bad reputation at the company, that stigma is going to unfortunately go with you if they refer you. So I would say, like, if it's somebody you went to school with and they were always like lackluster student and they talk bad about their employer, like they might do that at work too, right? So like knowing who, like, if I would always say, like, look for champions of the company, right? Like people who promote it, who talk positively and things like that. I mean, obviously you never know. They could be that way and then still be a bad person to get a referral from, but you could do your own due diligence and use your own judgment.
Definitely really good advice with both of those. And I'm seeing another common question in the chat, which, we talked about earlier about how to reach out and develop a relationship with recruiters. And the audience wants to know, is there like specific things that you should say when reaching out over LinkedIn to recruiters? And because I imagine you're probably getting reached out all the time over LinkedIn that can help you stand out. Is there something that's like a turn off or so, that's, you don't want to say in an initial message?
I'd be happy to start this conversation off. I think it's pretty easy to tell when this is a message that's been copy and pasted a few times. When maybe you're just kind of hitting the rounds and getting you and your resume out there. But really take a second to kind of, look around the recruiters LinkedIn, like find, like we were saying earlier, those common meeting points. Or if you have a specific question, if there's a reason you think you're interested, really kind of letting like yourself and what makes your interest in this opportunity or in our agency unique is always a great grab for me. But yeah, I would say especially like a specific question, not just like, oh, are you guys hiring right now, or that sort of thing. But hey, I'm curious about getting into the nonprofit sector, and I'm wondering about X, Y, and Z. That sort of thing. Just really kind of like my answer to the earlier question, kind of really showing yourself and being genuine, because I think that comes across pretty easily if this is just kind of another one of your messages that you're sending in.
Be engaging, I always say, when I actually return every inbox that comes to me, which is probably unique because I just like to communicate with people, and I prefer a proactive approach to recruiting. With that said, like, be specific, go to my webpage, like you said, go there, but also like be engaging on your site. Like if you reach out to somebody on LinkedIn and they go to your LinkedIn profile and you don't have anything there for them to like read about you or learn about you, like that's not very engaging. So spend some time on your LinkedIn so that if you're reaching out to people via LinkedIn, they can go back and do the same thing that you did to them, right? And so I would be that. Just be engaging and the work that you're doing. So be specific when you're reaching out. Make sure your LinkedIn is updated, your resume is updated on there, things like that.
Really good advice. And I know we're almost at time, so I just want to, get in one more quick question as well, more from like the student's perspective. We had a couple questions in here. It's like, if you're a student and you're unable to get internships, they're really competitive, right? How do you stand out in an interviewing process? Is there different advice that you can do to help round out your resume? I know a lot of my friends and myself, it was difficult to get internships, and I imagine it's still, the same. So is there any advice with that, with like kind of new grads?
I can start this one off.
Mhm.
I have a quick plug for women in business at the business school. That was a monumental experience for me getting roles, outside of college. So get involved in different organizations, activities, volunteer. Like, you will receive questions throughout your interview process that you can speak to. And I know when I was first interviewing, especially at Google, I spoke so much about my time in women in business. So I really do. I know it's obviously an additional thing to do while in school, but it will take you leaps and bounds further if you are willing to put in the time and work.
Really good advice. I don't know if anyone else from the panel has another little last minute point. If not,
I agree with Kelly. Any clubs you can join, any volunteer opportunities you can participate in, and any work experience you can get, even if you don't think it's applicable, that shows that you are a student plus working. You're able to prioritize competing deadlines, and honestly, any role you can kind of show how it relates to most positions. So any work experience as well.
definitely. Well, I think that's all great advice. We're even over time. So I just want to first off say thank you so much to the panel for their time. I know, they're giving back to current students and alumni right now. And I learned a lot from this conversation, and I hope the audience also did as well. If you enjoyed the event, please give us feedback and check out more events with the UO Alumni Association. And again, thank you so much for the panel for the great advice. And thank you everyone for joining, and take care. Appreciate it. Thank you.